Imagine achieving, like, absolutely everything you have ever dreamed of. Just the wildest heights of global fame.
Right.
But doing all of that by the time you are just 16 years old.
Yeah, which is just, it's impossible to really fathom.
It is. I mean, you have platinum records hanging on the wall. You are anchoring these historic, barrier-breaking television shows. You are experiencing the kind of adoration that most people, frankly, cannot even begin to process. You're at the absolute pinnacle of human attention.
To very top.
Exactly. Welcome to this deep dive. Our focus today is Phases. It's the highly anticipated debut memoir by Grammy Award-winning legend Brandy Norwood.
Universally known just as Brandy.
Just Brandy, yeah.
Right.
This is a 320-page hardcover, and it just hit the shelves on March 31st, 2026.
Through Hanover Square Press.
Right. And I want to jump straight into the timing of this release, because the juxtaposition here is, I mean, it's almost cinematic.
It really is.
Literally one day before this deeply vulnerable, secret-spilling book dropped, Brandy received the 2,839th star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame.
March 30th.
Yes. I'm trying to wrap my head around this, because the Walk of Fame is the ultimate Hollywood establishment honor, right?
Oh, absolutely.
It's the industry saying, hey, you played the game perfectly, here is your permanent monument.
Right, right.
But dropping this book the very next day, it feels like she's accepting the monument while simultaneously, like, detonating a bomb right at its base.
That's a great way to put it.
Does it feel to you like she is finally getting her flowers, but actively rewriting the card attached to them?
That is a remarkably accurate way to frame it, actually, because the Hollywood Walk of Fame, historically, is a retrospective gloss.
A gloss.
It's this cement validation of a very polished public persona. The establishment loves a clean narrative.
They need a clean narrative.
Right. But by releasing Phases 24 hours later, Brandy is deliberately disrupting that gloss. She is effectively saying, I accept this honor for the work I did, but you are now going to learn about the blood, the sweat, and the specific hidden traumas that went into pouring that concrete.
Wow.
It is a radical act of reclaiming her own narrative. She's taking the pen back from the industry publicist who wrote her story back in the 1990s.
She's not letting the star be the period at the end of the sentence.
No, she's making it a comma.
I love that. But before we can really dissect the weight of those private struggles that she reveals in the book, we have to establish the baseline.
We definitely do.
Because you have to understand the sheer, undeniable magnitude of her public success. The height of the pedestal directly dictates the pressure of the fall, right?
Exactly.
So let's look at that Walk of Fame ceremony on March 30. The crowd was massive, like one of the largest ever recorded for this kind of event.
It was huge.
But it wasn't just the size of the crowd. It was the specific people standing behind the podium to honor her.
Oh, the lineup was incredible.
We are talking about a masterclass in cultural royalty. Monica, Issa Rae, Babyface, Jennifer Lewis, Tisha Campbell, Kalani.
The visual of that group standing together is incredibly potent.
Yeah.
It represents a living timeline of Black excellence in Hollywood. I mean, you have the established veterans like Jennifer Lewis and Tisha Campbell who navigated the industry before Brandy.
Right.
You have Monica representing the direct peer group in the shared trenches of 90s R&B.
Yes, the peers.
And crucially, you have Issa Rae and Kalani. They represent the direct lineage of Brandy's influence.
The next generation.
Exactly. They are the generation that grew up taking notes from her.
And Issa Rae's speech, that's what really caught my attention.
So good.
Issa Rae, who is obviously the creative force behind Insecure, she stepped up to the microphone and explicitly called Brandy the blueprint.
The blueprint.
She laid out this whole argument that without Brandy's sitcom, Moesha, shows like The Parkers, Girlfriends, and eventually her own show, Insecure, might never have existed at all.
She's completely right.
Now, I know Moesha was huge, but was the television landscape in 1996 really that barren for young Black women? Like, was she genuinely the catalyst?
She absolutely was the catalyst. We have to understand the mechanics of network television in the mid-90s.
Okay, set the scene.
Representation for Black audiences existed, but it was heavily, heavily categorized.
How so?
Well, you had the aspirational family dynamic, right? Like The Cosby Show or Family Matters.
What? Right.
Or you had adult-centered comedies like Martin and Living Single.
Classic shows.
Amazing shows. But what was completely missing was a grounded, relatable narrative centered squarely on a smart, flawed, middle-class Black teenage girl who was just navigating everyday adolescence.
Just a normal teen.
Exactly. And network executives are notoriously risk-averse. They rely on established formulas.
They want what already works.
Right, and Moesha wasn't a proven formula.
Mm.
But Brandy's sheer star power forced the door open. So when Issa Rae calls her the blueprint, she is acknowledging a specific commercial breakthrough. Brandy proved to a very skeptical television industry that stories centering young Black women could be massive, mainstream, commercially viable hits.
Hits that could anchor an entire network.
Exactly. She shifted the financial logic of Hollywood.
She changed the math for the executives.
Yeah.
And while she is fundamentally changing television logic, she is simultaneously reaching the absolute apex of the music industry.
At the exact same time.
Yes. At that same Walk of Fame ceremony, Babyface recalled a conversation he had with Whitney Houston.
Oh, this was amazing.
Right. According to Babyface, Whitney claimed that Brandy had one of the best voices she had ever heard in her life. Having Whitney Houston, a woman universally referred to as the voice, say that about you. I can't even fathom the validation.
It is the ultimate endorsement. I mean, Whitney Houston did not hand out vocal praise lightly.
No, she didn't.
She understood the mechanics of vocal performance better than almost anyone alive.
Right.
So for her to bestow that level of reverence onto Brandy, it essentially cemented Brandy's title among her peers as the vocal Bible.
The vocal Bible?
Yeah, it validated her not just as a commercially successful pop star, but as a generational technical savant.
Okay, so this leads me to a major question. Let's contextualize this trajectory for a second.
Let's do it.
We are talking about a girl who started out singing in churches in Macomb, Mississippi.
Right.
She lands a major record deal at 14. She goes platinum at 15. And she is starring in her own hit sitcom at 16.
It's wild.
I look at those numbers and my brain just short circuits. How does a human being, let alone a developing teenager, process that kind of velocity?
Bro, it's almost impossible.
Like, what happens to the psychology of a child when they become the CEO of their own multi-million-dollar existence before they can even legally drive?
It creates a psychological environment where normal adolescent development is entirely suspended.
Suspended.
Yeah. The teenage brain is biologically wired for trial and error. It is designed to test boundaries, to make mistakes, to figure out identity, and learn from failure.
Right, that's how you grow up.
Exactly. But when you hit platinum at 15 and you carry a whole television network at 16, failure is no longer a personal learning experience.
What is it?
It is a corporate liability.
Oh, wow. A corporate liability.
Right. A mistake doesn't just get you grounded, it jeopardizes the livelihoods of hundreds of people. Managers, agents, crew members, label executives, they all rely on you.
So the pressure becomes absolute perfection.
Absolute perfection. You aren't allowed to have a messy, exploratory youth. Your identity is rapidly crystallized, commodified, and locked into place.
You're frozen.
Yeah, you are forced to perform adulthood while internally lacking the life experience to actually process what is happening to you.
You essentially become a product wrapped in human skin.
Sadly, yes.
And she just kept elevating that product because the very next year, in 1997, she shatters another ceiling.
The big one.
She becomes the first Black actress to play Cinderella on screen in the Disney television production.
Iconic.
And she didn't just audition, right? She was handpicked to star alongside Whitney Houston, who played her fairy godmother.
Whitney specifically wanted her.
I remember the visual impact of that movie. Seeing a Black Cinderella with box braids, it wasn't just entertaining. It felt like a cultural earthquake for an entire generation of kids watching.
It was a fundamental paradigm shift in visual culture.
How so?
Prior to 1997, the iconography of classic fairy tales, the princesses, the royalty, the magic, was overwhelmingly, almost exclusively white.
True. Very true.
By stepping into that role, Brandy rewrote the visual language of fantasy. She told millions of children of color that they inherently belonged in narratives of magic and royalty.
And what is so poignant in Phases is how she details the behind-the-scenes reality of that project.
Yeah, the relationship with Whitney.
Exactly. Whitney Houston wasn't just acting as a fairy godmother on screen. She was actively serving that role in Brandy's real life. The book describes this deep mentor-friend bond where Whitney was actively trying to shield and guide Brandy through these incredibly treacherous waters of superstardom.
Because Whitney knew. Whitney knew exactly how predatory the industry could be.
She had lived it, which makes Whitney's eventual passing and Brandy's reflections on it in the memoir carry so much more emotional weight. She lost her shield.
Because she really did.
Now, we also have to talk about how she navigated the sheer competitiveness of the industry, specifically the Monica dynamic.
We have to talk about Monica.
The book goes into the creation of their legendary Grammy-winning duet, The Boy Is Mine.
So good.
And there is a detail here that I absolutely love because it is so incredibly human. The idea for this massive, defining R&B anthem came to Brandy while she was sitting around watching the Jerry Springer show.
Isn't that amazing?
It's so fun.
That is the beauty of the creative process, right? Taking lowbrow, chaotic cultural touchstones and just refining them into high art.
Yeah.
But The Boy Is Mine is also a masterstroke of public relations judo.
PR judo, I like that.
Because the media, relying on very tired misogynistic tropes, had spent months trying to pit these two phenomenally talented young Black women against each other.
They desperately wanted a catfight.
Desperately. So Brandy and Monica, along with their teams, looked at that media momentum and they weaponized it.
They leaned into it.
They took the exact narrative the tabloids were trying to use to tear them down, leaned into it theatrically, and monetized it into the best-selling song of the year.
They essentially said, oh, you want us to fight over a boy? Fine, we'll sing about it and take your money.
Exactly.
And it spent 13 weeks at #1.
Huge success.
But what makes this story so satisfying in the book is the full circle resolution. They didn't let the industry permanently fracture them.
No, they didn't.
Because we just saw them touring together in 2025, a full 27 years later. And now they are co-headlining the 2026 Essence Festival of Culture in New Orleans.
It is a complete reclamation of the narrative.
It really is. They evolved from bitter rivals created by the press to lifelong collaborators.
It's a profound testament to their endurance. I mean, they survived a music industry machine that actively tried to throw them into a gladiator arena just for public entertainment.
Right.
And they emerged on the other side with their relationship intact.
Speaking of the media trying to create conflict, Phases also directly tackles her relationship with her brother, Ray J.
This was a very illuminating part of the book.
For decades, the tabloid narrative was totally obsessed with this idea of an intense sibling rivalry.
Right.
But Brandy uses the memoir to systematically dismantle that. She explains that their relationship is deeply loving, albeit complex. But here's the fascinating part. She reveals her own internal guilt.
Yeah.
She was terrified that her blinding, massive success early on was actively casting a shadow over him. She wasn't competing with him. She was desperately worried about eclipsing him.
Which is an incredibly heavy psychological burden for a sister to carry.
I can't imagine.
When one sibling becomes the primary commercial engine of a family at such a young age, it irreversibly alters the family dynamic.
The whole structure shifts.
Yeah, the traditional roles of protector and provider get completely upended.
Right.
By addressing this directly in the book, Brandy is essentially protecting her brother. She is clarifying that the rivalry was an invention of a media landscape that fundamentally lacked the nuance to understand how two siblings could exist in the same brutal industry without trying to destroy one another.
We just wanted another feud.
Exactly.
Okay, so we have built the monument.
Yeah.
We have the platinum records, the TV milestones, the Cinderella moment, the Walk of Fame star.
It's an incredible list.
It's so incredibly easy to look at that list, to see the polished, smiling face on the album covers, and assume a life of pure, frictionless perfection.
Of course.
But that total loss of bodily autonomy we discussed earlier, that requirement to be a perfect, flawless corporation at all times,
Yeah.
that perfectly explains what happens next in the book.
Yes, it does.
Because the pressure didn't just vanish, it internalized.
It has to go somewhere.
Right. And this leads us to a deeply difficult part of her story, her teenage battle with bulimia and body dysmorphia.
This was tough to read.
There is a quote in the memoir that stopped me in my tracks. She writes that when she was purging, she believed she was purging more than food. She was trying to, quote, expel the weight of disappointment.
Wow.
Just let that sink in. Expel the weight of disappointment.
The precision of that phrasing is devastating.
It really is.
What Brandy is doing here is articulating the profound somatic reality of an eating disorder, particularly within the context of fame.
Yeah.
Yes, there was immense crushing pressure to maintain a specific physical aesthetic for the cameras, but the mechanics of her bulimia, as she describes it, were fundamentally about control.
Control.
Think about her life. Her schedule, her wardrobe, her lines, the songs she sang, the interviews she gave.
Every single minute was planned.
Every single micro decision was heavily managed and dictated by adults on a payroll. She controlled almost nothing about her own existence. In that environment, the physical body becomes the very last domain where a teenager can exert absolute, unmitigated authority.
The only thing she had left.
Exactly. Purging becomes this tragic physical mechanism to literally vomit up the psychological distress, the anxiety, and the suffocating fear of letting down the massive apparatus that relies on her perfection.
It makes complete sense when you view it as a pressure cooker. If you weld the release valve shut,
Yeah.
like, if she can't rebel, if she can't act out, if she can't just be a normal, messy teen because millions of dollars are on the line, that pressure doesn't just disappear.
It turns inward.
It turns inward. She looks in the mirror and doesn't see the superstar that the public sees. She sees a vessel carrying everyone else's expectations, and she attacks the vessel.
Precisely. And that exact mechanism of intense internal fear surrounding her public image, that dictated her life choices well into young adulthood.
It wasn't just the teenage phase.
No, it was a survival strategy that she carried forward. Which brings us directly to the incredibly complex circumstances surrounding her pregnancy with her daughter, Sarai, who is now 23 years old.
Yes. The lengths she felt compelled to go to in order to protect that flawless blueprint image during her pregnancy are staggering.
Unbelievable.
Let's set the sociological scene here for the listener. This was the early 2000s.
A very different time.
The culture was vastly different. She faced immense, overwhelming societal stigma regarding an out-of-wedlock pregnancy.
Right.
So to protect her brand, to protect her livelihood, she actually suggested to the father of her child, the producer Robert Smith, that they create a fake marriage.
They fabricated a marriage.
They literally pretended to the public that they were legally married just to shield her from moral judgment.
Yeah.
I look at this now and I have to ask, why was this necessary? Because male artists in the early 2000s were having kids all the time without their careers collapsing. Why was she so cornered?
It exposes the profound, deeply entrenched hypocrisy of the entertainment industry and the moral panic of that specific era.
Right.
You are absolutely right. Male R&B stars, actors, rappers, they were routinely having children out of wedlock, and it was often treated as a mere footnote in their biographies.
Or even made them look cooler.
Exactly. It sometimes enhanced their bad boy mystique. But Brandy wasn't just a singer. Her entire corporate identity was built on the foundation of Moesha.
The good girl.
She was the relatable, wholesome, good girl avatar for an entire generation. And the industry holds young Black women to impossible puritanical standards.
Completely impossible.
The fear of financial and cultural ruin was so severe, so palpable, that actively constructing a massive, logistically complex lie about a marriage seemed like a safer business strategy than simply telling the truth and hoping the public would show her grace.
Hoping for grace was too big of a risk.
Too big.
It is exhausting just thinking about the logistics of maintaining a fake marriage for the press. But eventually, the truth always surfaces. And when the lie unraveled, she didn't just issue a press release.
No, she didn't.
The book details the aftermath, where she went on the Oprah Winfrey Show to publicly confess and apologize for the lie.
A huge moment.
And there's this moment of wry reflection in the memoir where she notes, quote, "You just don't lie to Oprah."
It's so true.
I laughed when I read it, but I also realized how serious that was. Why Oprah? Why was that the necessary stage for this apology?
Because in the cultural ecosystem of the late 90s and early 2000s, Oprah Winfrey was not merely a daytime talk show host.
No.
She operated as the supreme arbiter of moral redemption in American society.
Oh, that's a great way to put it. The supreme arbiter.
If a public figure stumbled, committed a taboo, or faced a scandal, the Oprah Winfrey Show was the secular confessional.
Right. You went there to do penance.
You went there to bare your soul, seek public absolution, and, ideally, be welcomed back into the mainstream flock. Brandy understood the exact gravity of the sin she had committed in the eyes of her conservative fan base. She knew that a press release wouldn't suffice. She had to lay her apology upon the highest cultural altar available to prove her contrition.
The highest cultural altar. That is perfectly stated.
Thank you.
And the emotional trials just continued to compound for her. Phases also delves into a deeply dark period. The emotional devastation following the deadly 2007 car accident she was involved in.
This is a very heavy section of the book.
It is. She uses the book to unpack the deep, lingering guilt and the profound, paralyzing grief that followed that tragedy. And reading this, it struck me how rarely we allow public figures to process trauma. We expect them to issue a statement, settle the lawsuit, and get back to entertaining us.
Right. That is the dehumanizing nature of extreme fame. The public consumes celebrities as avatars, as two-dimensional characters on a screen.
Not as real people.
Exactly. Not as human beings with nervous systems that process trauma exactly like anyone else. When a catastrophic event occurs, specifically a tragedy involving the loss of a human life, the brain requires an immense amount of time, quiet, space, and grace to process the shock and the survivor's guilt, entirely independent of who is legally at fault.
Yes, exactly.
But when you are Brandy, that necessary psychological processing is constantly interrupted.
But what?
By paparazzi, screaming headlines, legal surveillance, and the court of public opinion.
You can't even grieve privately.
Her grief was inherently complicated by hypervisibility. To articulate the depths of that dark period in this memoir is an act of extreme courage.
It is. And you can see how this chronic, compounding emotional exhaustion bled directly into her professional capacity.
Oh, without a doubt.
The book reveals that by season 5 of Moesha, she had completely burned out.
Completely.
She writes that she grew to deeply resent the character, to the point where she no longer recognized herself.
I can understand that.
Right. She was showing up on set playing a teenager dealing with prom drama, while internally she had lived lifetimes of trauma, secrets, and adult pressures that Moesha Mitchell couldn't even begin to fathom.
That is the ultimate tragic dissonance of the child actor. You eventually outgrow the container that made you beloved.
The container, wow.
By season 5, Brandy is a young woman navigating massive, complex adult realities, yet she is contractually obligated to clock in every morning, put on the wardrobe, and adopt the mannerisms of a sanitized teenager.
The whiplash.
The psychological whiplash required to continuously jump between her painful, complicated reality and the sitcom's neatly resolved 22-minute reality. It creates a profound sense of alienation from one's own identity.
It's like wearing a mask that is slowly melting into your actual face and you are just desperate to rip it off.
Yes.
But even within that intense resentment, she notes in the book that she still wishes the fans had gotten a proper conclusion.
Because it ended on the cliffhanger.
Famously ended on a massive cliffhanger that was never resolved. So even while she was suffocating in the role, she still carried a deep sense of duty to the audience who loved it.
Which highlights a fundamental core of empathy and professionalism that survived despite her being completely personally depleted.
Exactly. Okay, we are now going to transition into the most talked about, sensitive, and heavy section of this memoir.
Right.
And I want to pause here to speak directly to you, the listener. If you're listening to this, we are moving into incredibly serious territory regarding power dynamics and consent.
Yes.
We're going to look strictly at the timelines, the facts, and the historical records as they are presented in the book and the surrounding commentary. We are not interested in sensationalism. We are interested in understanding the mechanisms of how this happened.
It is absolutely crucial to analyze this with a steady, objective lens. We're unpacking deeply personal accounts that challenge long-held industry narratives.
Right. So let's lay out the Wanya Moore's allegations exactly as Brandy details them in phases. The book establishes a very specific, undeniable timeline. According to her account, she and the Boyz, the second men singer, first connected in 1994. They were collaborating in the studio on the track Broken Hearted.
Okay, 1994.
The following year, in 1995, her career explodes, and she joins Boyz the Second Men as the opening act on their massive Tessic World Tour.
Right.
Let's lock in the ages here, because the ages are the entire crux of the conversation. During this period, Brandy was 15, turning 16. Wanya Morris was 22.
The age gap is the defining context of every interaction that follows.
Absolutely.
If we're talking about a 30-year-old and a 37-year-old, the 7-year difference is mathematically the same, but practically irrelevant.
Right, they're both adults.
But 15 and 22 represents two entirely different biological, developmental, legal, and social strata.
They are in different universes.
You have a minor whose brain is still forming, and an adult who has full legal autonomy and significantly more life experience, particularly within the hyper-accelerated environment of the music industry.
And Brandy meticulously describes how this dynamic evolved. She writes that, initially, Morris served as a musical mentor.
Right.
He was the older, established industry veteran offering advice to the rising star. He was checking in on her, guiding her. It started as a deeply supportive professional dynamic.
Which is how it often starts.
But She alleges that this relationship systematically shifted from mentorship into a romantic and eventually sexual relationship while she was still legally a minor. I'm trying to understand how this happens right under the noses of the adults on the tour.
Well, this is a pattern we see illuminated in countless memoirs from former child stars.
Sadly, yes.
The transition from a protector or mentor figure into a romantic partner involves a profound systematic crossing of boundaries. Think about the power structure.
Okay.
When an older, globally established industry figure offers guidance to a 15-year-old newcomer, it immediately generates a dynamic of immense gratitude, deference, and awe.
She looks up to him.
Exactly. She relies on his expertise and intrinsically trusts him. When the adult then leverages that established trust into romantic interest, the teenager inherently lacks the cognitive life experience to recognize the shift as inappropriate or predatory.
They just feel chosen.
Right. To the 15-year-old, the attention feels validating. They invariably confuse exploitation with validation.
Confusing exploitation with validation, that's chilling.
It is. And as for the adults on the tour, in the music industry, the adults are usually on the payroll of the artists. If the headliner is pursuing the opening act, the entire ecosystem is financially incentivized to look the other way.
Everyone is making money, so nobody speaks up.
Exactly.
And because they knew this was inherently wrong, they constructed what Brandy calls the public fiction.
The public fiction.
The book states that they both fully understood that if the public or the media found out about a 22-year-old dating a 15-year-old, it would ignite a career-ending scandal. So they strategized a lie. They agreed to pretend to the world that they were simply waiting until she officially turned 18 before pursuing anything romantic. They put on a show for the cameras, and she notes that Mars only referred to himself as her boyfriend behind closed doors.
The very concept of the public fiction is devastating to the defense of these types of relationships.
Why is that?
Because it explicitly proves that the secrecy wasn't an accident or a matter of privacy. It was a conscious strategy to evade accountability.
They knew it was wrong.
By actively agreeing to hide the true nature of the relationship, the adult party is demonstrating a clear understanding of the legal and societal taboo of their actions.
Right.
But for the 15-year-old girl, the secrecy is frequently romanticized.
It feels like Romeo and Juliet.
Exactly. It feels like a movie, a grand, forbidden us against the world narrative. She is carrying this monumental secret, performing a completely normal adolescence for her parents, the press, and her fans, while living a fractured, hidden reality in private.
And the psychological toll of that?
Maintaining two conflicting realities at 15 years old is completely destabilizing.
And she was completely invested in that hidden reality. She writes that she genuinely believed they were deeply in love, or at least what a 16-year-old conceptualizes love to be.
Right.
This brings us to one of the most vulnerable and painful admissions in the entire book. She discusses the moment she lost her virginity to Morris.
Very difficult section to read.
And she describes the experience as completely lacking the specialness or the magic she had always imagined.
Yeah.
She grew up with very wholesome values. She originally wanted to wait until marriage. But she writes that she convinced herself that having sex would not only strengthen their bond, but crucially, it would prove to him that she was mature enough to be in the relationship.
Oh.
I read that line and I just wanted to jump into the book and stop her. Because feeling the absolute need to provide physical proof of your maturity is the most glaring red flag of an unbalanced power dynamic.
Absolutely.
When you are in an equal, healthy partnership, you don't have to sacrifice your comfort to prove you deserve to be there. Can you unpack why teenagers so often fall into this specific trap?
It stems from the inherent biological insecurity of youth, which is only magnified by the isolating environment of fame.
Okay.
When you are 15 or 16, your primary psychological objective is to be perceived as older, as capable, as an equal to adults.
Right. You just want to be taken seriously.
When a 22-year-old superstar validates you by showing romantic interest, it is a massive ego boost. It is intoxicating.
Yeah.
But beneath the intoxication is a constant humming anxiety that the adult will suddenly realize you are just a kid, get bored, and leave.
So she has to perform maturity.
So the teenager feels a desperate, urgent need to artificially bridge that developmental gap. The adult partner rarely has to explicitly demand intimacy. The structural imbalance of the relationship does the work for them.
The imbalance does the work.
Yeah.
It's powerful.
The teenager voluntarily abandons their own boundaries, like their desire to wait until marriage, in a desperate bid to appease the older partner and secure the attachment. They mistake the sacrifice of their own bodily autonomy for an act of profound adult love.
But as Brandy so clearly reflects now, with the benefit of hindsight, the sacrifice wasn't about her agency at all. It was about managing his perception of her.
Exactly. She was literally abandoning her own core values just to keep him interested.
And looking back with adult eyes, she outlines all the glaring red flags that she was too young to process at the time.
Right.
She writes that Morris became increasingly critical of her. He would actively compare her to other artists, specifically bringing up Mariah Carey.
The tactic of comparing her to Mariah Carey is incredibly insidious.
Why Mariah specifically?
Because in the mid-90s, Mariah Carey was the ultimate standard of adult female vocal supremacy.
The pinnacle.
By constantly comparing his 15-year-old partner to an established, dominant adult woman, he is utilizing a classic method of diminishing self-esteem. It constantly reinforces the power imbalance.
Keeping her on her toes.
It keeps the younger person perpetually striving, constantly feeling like they are coming up short and totally off balance.
And the way the relationship ultimately concluded is just a gut punch. She discovered he was being unfaithful, and he eventually confessed to multiple infidelities.
Right.
She writes that in that moment, the illusion shattered, and she realized she had been played.
And that conclusion of the relationship, the multiple infidelities, is what finally shatters the romanticized public fiction. It forces her to realize that while she was risking her reputation, sacrificing her values, and treating the relationship as a sacred secret, he was treating it casually. He was not operating with the same stakes.
Not at all. Which is exactly why the core message of her account in Phases is so necessary. She is using this book to actively, aggressively reclaim her narrative from the 90s rumor mill.
She has to.
She explicitly rejects the labels that the industry tried to staple to her for decades. She writes that she was not a fast girl with a crush. She was not a dramatic teenager who couldn't handle rejection. And she was certainly not an unstable, obsessive fan.
And that reclamation is sociologically vital. For decades, our culture has defaulted to victim-blaming teenage girls in these exact scenarios.
It's always the girl's fault.
Always. Society relies on the Lolita trope, characterizing the young girl as hypersexual, manipulative, or overly eager in order to absolve the adult man of his responsibility. Brandy is taking a sledgehammer to that trope.
Yes, and she does it with one definitive, undeniable statement. I want to read this quote exactly as it appears in the book because it leaves absolutely zero room for interpretation.
Go ahead.
She writes, "I was a child, and he was an adult, and it's time the world understood the difference."
It is a brilliant distillation of the entire complex issue.
It really is.
It strips away all the distracting variables, the fame, the money, the tour buses, the music, the glamour, and reduces the situation to its fundamental biological and legal reality. Child. Adult.
Nothing else matters.
The absolute clarity of that statement evaporates all the industry excuses that have been relied upon for 30 years.
It is a line that will be studied.
Truly.
Now, to fully grasp the gravity of these revelations and the massive cultural reckoning that is currently exploding across the internet, we have to examine the response from the other side.
Yes, we do.
We must look at how Wanya Morris has historically framed this dynamic and how the public is digesting this completely polarizing news cycle.
Indeed. It is imperative that we present both perspectives based on the historical record, ensuring we analyze the claims objectively.
Right. So let's lay out Wanya Morris's side of the story, as it has been presented prior to this book.
Okay.
Historically, Morris has flat out denied that he and Brandy engaged in a romantic relationship before she turned 18. There is a specific, well-documented Instagram Live from 2021 where he directly addressed these rumors.
I remember that.
In that broadcast, he framed the early connection strictly as a friendship. He stated that it only naturally evolved into a romance after she became of legal age.
And he added a very specific caveat in that 2021 statement that we need to highlight.
What was that?
He claimed that Brandy's parents, her mother and father, were intimately involved in and aware of their relationship dynamic from the very beginning.
Oh, really?
Yes, he stated that her parents sanctioned his role as a guide for Brandy in her career. He essentially framed his presence in her early life as a familial protective mentorship, insisting that anyone could ask Brandy and she would corroborate that exact narrative.
And he also addressed the breakup in that same live stream, didn't he?
He did. He described it as a normal, natural occurrence, something that just happens when two young people grow apart. He acknowledged that breakups are hurtful, but he characterized the end of their relationship as a mutual evolution rather than a traumatic betrayal of trust.
So his historical stance has consistently been one of normalization.
Yes, he has attempted to frame the entire timeline as a standard, deeply appropriate progression. From a family-approved mentor to a young adult romance once she was 18, culminating in a typical, albeit sad, breakup.
But, and there's a big but, the internet is a permanent archive.
Oh, it never forgets.
And since the release of Phases, the public has not simply accepted his 2021 denial. Internet sleuths went digging, and a clip from a 2014 Breakfast Club radio interview has resurfaced and gone completely viral across every platform.
This clip is everywhere.
In this older interview, the hosts ask Morris directly about the nature of his relationship with Brandy, and they specifically probe about her age at the time. And in this clip, he reportedly admits they were intimate when she was 16 or 17.
Right.
But it's the specific quote he uses that has everyone in an absolute uproar. He casually remarks that she was, quote, old enough to get it.
I mean...
And this is exactly where his meticulously constructed 2021 narrative completely collides with his own prior unguarded statements.
Yeah.
The 2014 Breakfast Club clip is catastrophic to his defense. That specific phrasing, old enough to get it, is not just crude. It is highly revealing of a very specific, deeply ingrained predatory mindset that was rampant in the music industry, particularly in the 90s. It perfectly illustrates that proving maturity trap we talked about, right?
Exactly. It relies entirely on the adult's subjective perception of a teenager's physical development or behavioral maturity to justify crossing hard legal and ethical boundaries. It completely overrides the objective legal reality of her age.
But this time, we are seeing it weaponized from the adult's perspective. He's essentially saying, well, she acted old enough, therefore I'm not culpable.
That's exactly what he's saying.
And the public backlash to this resurfaced clip has been nuclear. Which brings us to today. Has Morris responded to the book directly?
As of the recording of this deep dive, he has not.
Nothing.
Wanya Morris has not publicly responded to the specific, detailed claims made in the pages of Phases. Multiple major news outlets, including TMZ, People magazine, and others, have reached out to his representatives for comment, but there has been complete silence.
And in court of public opinion, especially on social media, silence is incredibly loud. Let's analyze that public reaction, because it is overwhelming, and it is fascinatingly divided. On one side, you have a massive outpouring of praise for Brandy's courage.
So much support.
Prominent cultural journalists like Garrett Kennedy have publicly commended her, stating that it was finally time to put this story to rest and let her own her truth.
The support from journalists like Kennedy is functionally very important. It validates her fundamental right to author her own history.
Right.
For decades, this dynamic was treated as a whisper network rumor, a piece of salacious industry gossip. By formally publishing it in a memoir, she codifies it.
She turns it into history.
She turns a rumor into a permanent historical record. And the public is responding by immediately placing her story within a much larger, very urgent, modern context.
Yes. The parallels being drawn right now are impossible to ignore.
So many parallels.
Commentators across the internet are instantly comparing Brandy's experience to other prominent women in entertainment who have recently come forward about relationships with older men when they were minors.
Right.
We are seeing discussions involving Demi Lovato's experiences, Keith Palmer's reflections,
Right.
and inevitably, due to this specific era, the genre of music and the industry environment, commentators are heavily comparing this to the late Aaliyah's well-documented and tragic situation with R. Kelly.
The Aaliyah comparison is particularly potent and heartbreaking.
It really is.
You are looking at two young, phenomenally talented Black girls navigating the 90s R&B scene, both mentored by older, incredibly powerful male superstars, both caught in dynamics where the public suspected something was deeply wrong, but the massive industry machinery moved to protect the men and silence the girls.
The machine protected the men.
Always. The fundamental difference here is that Brandy survived to write the book.
Wow. Brandy survived to write the book. That really puts the stakes into perspective.
By drawing these systemic parallels, the public is recognizing that this wasn't an isolated incident of bad judgment by one individual. It was an intersectional, systemic feature of an industry that routinely and predictably left young girls unprotected.
But of course, the internet is not a monolith.
Uh-huh.
There is another side to the reaction.
There always is.
There are critics on social media who are questioning the timing of her revelations. You see people asking, why bring this up now, 30 years later?
Right.
Some are debating the mutual responsibility of both parties, and others are correctly pointing out that, purely from a media cycle perspective, the current conversation is heavily one-sided since Morris hasn't issued a new defense.
It is entirely common for the public to question the timing of trauma disclosure, but trauma processing does not operate on a public relations schedule.
No, it doesn't.
It can take decades for an individual to gain the necessary emotional distance, to acquire the vocabulary, and to secure the personal safety required to articulate exactly what happened to them, especially when the narrative involves taking on a beloved public figure with their own massive fan base.
That's a huge undertaking.
However, the observation about the narrative being one-sided is a valid media critique. Until Morris responds to the specific allegations in the text, the public is essentially debating a monologue rather than a dialogue.
Which is exactly why the broader cultural analysis that is happening in the press right now is so vital. It moves the conversation beyond a simple he said, she said debate.
It elevates it.
Essence magazine published a profound op-ed that I think perfectly captures the intellectual shift happening right now. This piece specifically argues against the temptation to dismiss these relationships as simply a product of the times, because we hear that excuse constantly, right? Oh, it was the 90s, things were different, you can't judge them by today's standards.
The product of the times argument is a deeply intellectually lazy way to evade accountability.
Absolutely.
The Essence op-ed takes a sledgehammer to the fast girl myth. The core argument of this piece is that it recenters the inherent vulnerability of the child.
Okay, unpack that.
It argues that teenage girls under the age of consent are not fast, they are highly impressionable, they're desperately seeking validation, they are navigating immense, confusing hormonal and social changes.
It's just normal teen stuff.
Right. That inherent vulnerability does not make them complicit in their own exploitation, it makes them prime targets for it.
Prime targets.
The op-ed brilliantly argues that adults in positions of power, whether the year is 1995 or 2025, have a fundamental, unwavering duty to know better and to protect minors rather than exploit their developmental need for validation.
And this isn't just a fringe opinion living in one magazine. Outlets across the entire media spectrum are adopting this analytical stance. MSNBC, The Griot, BT, The Shade Room, Bossip, they're all covering this extensively.
It's a huge story.
And they are framing it not as a singular, juicy celebrity scandal, but as a broader catastrophic failure of the 1990s music industry ecosystem. The consensus is that the industry machinery cared significantly more about protecting the hitmakers and the financial bottom line than it did about protecting the young, vulnerable female artists it was actively profiting from.
It is a massive, necessary cultural reckoning. We are finally, collectively, retroactively applying modern, sophisticated understandings of consent and power dynamics to the media, the music, and the celebrity narratives that we consumed entirely uncritically 30 years ago.
It's about time. So we have navigated the incredibly heavy, challenging, and controversial aspects of this story, and it is so easy for the algorithms, the TikToks, and the headlines to focus exclusively on the pain, the allegations, and the scandal.
Oh, that's what gets the clicks.
But we have to pivot here, because the book itself, Phases, is ultimately a story of profound triumph and healing.
Absolutely. To reduce this entire meticulously written memoir to a single controversial chapter about a 90s relationship would be a massive disservice to the work Brandy has done on herself and on the page.
Exactly. I want to bring the focus back to the physical 320-page hardcover sitting on the shelves right now. Phases is not a book of cheap celebrity gossip.
Not at all.
It is not a burn book designed to settle scores. It is a profound, incredibly expansive exploration of a full human life. She writes about the complexities of motherhood, the daily reality of managing mental health, her deepening spirituality, the nuances of love, the bizarre nature of industry competition, and the profound grief of loss.
She covers so much ground.
She is talking about the near impossible challenge of growing up in the brightest spotlight imaginable without a roadmap.
It is a deeply holistic view of her existence. By choosing to include the intense trauma right alongside the monumental triumphs, she's demonstrating how they constantly inform one another. Her struggles with mental health give vital context to the raw emotion in her vocal performances. Her complex, conflicted feelings about Moesha add profound depth to the legacy of the show itself.
It all connects.
She is finally allowing the public to see her in 3 full dimensions, rather than the flat, two-dimensional, perfectly smiling pop star image she was forced into at 15.
There's a beautiful quote from a recent NPR interview she gave regarding the actual writing process.
Oh, I love this interview.
She told NPR that writing the book was, quote, one of the most challenging yet rewarding experiences of her life. But the key part is that she added it allowed her to be fearless and vulnerable for the very first time.
For the very first
I
time.
want you to really think about that. If you're listening, think about 30 years of global fame, 30 years of millions of people thinking they know her, and she is just now feeling like she can be fearless and vulnerable.
It speaks entirely to the suffocating nature of that public fiction we discussed earlier. Writing a memoir is the ultimate act of reclaiming your own history. When you write it down, you own it. The label can't edit it out. A publicist can't spin it in a press release. A network executive can't cancel it. It is her truth, permanently bound in ink.
Bound in ink.
That kind of narrative agency, after spending decades being managed, styled, and produced by committees of adults, is profoundly liberating.
And she is taking that liberation directly to the fans. She has launched a conversation with Brandy, Phases Book Tour.
I saw that.
It is a highly curated two-city tour organized by Live Nation Urban, hitting Los Angeles and Brooklyn, and the logistics of this tour are brilliant. Every single ticket purchased includes a physical copy of the memoir.
That is so smart.
She is physically ensuring that the people who show up to hear her speak leave with the full, unedited story in their hands.
It is a masterclass in bypassing the media filter. She is handing her narrative directly to the people who have supported her for 3 decades, ensuring they get the context, not just the quotes taken out of context.
We strongly, strongly encourage you, the listener, to pick up a copy of this book. Whether you grew up watching her on your TV screen every week, whether you memorized every single vocal run in I Wanna Be Down, or even if you are just discovering the depths of her story for the very first time today.
You have to read it.
Reading the nuances, the tone, and the context of her journey firsthand is absolutely vital to understanding the full picture. You simply cannot get the full spectrum of a human life from a viral tweet, a 15-second video clip, or a fragmented headline.
I agree completely. The true value of Phases lies in its unapologetic complexity. It challenges the reader to hold multiple, sometimes conflicting truths at once. The undeniable generational brilliance of her artistry, alongside the undeniable devastating pain of her early experiences.
Which perfectly brings us to the core message of this entire endeavor. Let's close this section with Brandy's own summary of her work.
Yes, let's hear her words.
She said, "This memoir is more than a book. It's a reflection of resilience, hope, and rediscovering myself beyond the fame, the music, and the spotlight."
That is the ultimate victory. She survived the machinery that was designed to consume her, and she found herself on the other side.
Okay, let's take a breath and recap the incredible sweeping journey we have been on during this deep dive.
It's been a lot.
We started with a little girl singing in churches in Macomb, Mississippi. We watched her skyrocket at an unimaginable pace to become a platinum-selling artist and a television pioneer, literally creating the blueprint for Black television in the 90s.
The blueprint.
We explored the crushing internalized pressure of that corporate fame, the heartbreaking battles with eating disorders, the necessity of a hidden pregnancy, the lingering guilt, and the profound exhaustion of wearing a character's mask for years.
The heavy cost of stardom.
We navigated the deeply sensitive and serious allegations regarding an exploitative power dynamic with an older mentor, and we examined exactly how our modern culture is finally reckoning with those systemic industry failures.
Right.
And we ended with a woman standing on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, newly cemented in history, finally speaking her unvarnished truth.
It is a truly epic narrative. And as we wrap up, I want to make one final call for empathy.
Please do.
The allegations discussed today regarding Wanya Morris are incredibly serious. As we have noted, both sides deserve to be heard, and the cultural debate will undoubtedly continue to unfold.
Right.
However, Brandy's bravery in stepping forward and dismantling her own public fiction is monumental. By speaking her truth, she opens a necessary, albeit painful, door for protecting young, vulnerable people who are navigating the treacherous waters of the entertainment industry today.
Very true.
Her story operates as both a stark, cautionary tale and a brilliant beacon of resilience.
It truly does. And I want to leave you, the listener, with one final provocative thought to mull over as you go about the rest of your day.
Okay, what is it?
We talked at the very beginning about the immense psychological weight of carrying a secret while standing in the brightest spotlight imaginable.
Yeah.
So I ask you, if a global, generational superstar like Brandy felt compelled to hide her trauma, her struggles, and her core truth for 30 years just to protect her image and her career, how much of the pop culture history we think we know is actually just a carefully constructed public fiction?
Oh, wow. That's a huge question.
Think about the posters hanging on your wall when you were 16 and wonder what realities were hiding behind those perfect glossy smiles.